Hey, hockey fans. Today we have a very special show. It's our 2019 draft show, which means, of course, we bring on draft expert, prospect expert, Steve Kournianos onto the podcast. If you haven't already heard of Steve, you should definitely be giving him a follow out on Twitter at the Draft Analyst. Also, check out his website, thedraftanalyst.com, where he has rankings of the top 500 prospects, in-depth player profiles, tons more, mock drafts, you name it, he's got it on there. A super fun conversation with Steve today. We got to talk about Ducks prospects, Ducks players, but just prospects from around the league. It just the amount of knowledge this guy has is crazy. You guys are really going to learn something and have a good time on this show today. I also want to go ahead and give him a shout out here about his 2019 draft report that drops on Monday, June 10th for just $5. It's a PDF download. It's got 250 detailed scouting reports, team-by-team previews, mock drafts, you name it, and he's got it on that draft report for you. That comes out Monday, June 10th for just $5. And now, without further ado, Steve Kournianos.
All right, we're back with the highly requested show we always have in June, our draft preview show. And we got a returning guest this year. We got Steve Kournianos joining us back on the show. How's it going, Steve?
Good, guys. How you doing tonight?
Not too bad. Not too bad. Catching a little bit of the Stanley Cup Finals. And I know you're busy prepping for the draft. I think everybody's kind of busy right now. The draft's coming up in less than 20 days now. So it's busy time of year, I think, right?
Oh my goodness! You just asked my wife what she has to say about the month of May and the month of June. It just like when's Daddy going to be available? Daddy's canceling a lot of stuff to take care of the. But it works out because the other, I guess, 8 months, I'm instead of spending 14 to 16 hours a day on the draft stuff and process, I'm spending like 8 to 10. So.
We always joke about it whenever you put out your top 500. I'm like, I don't know how he has a family. There's just no way.
Well, the kids go to bed. The kids go to bed at like 9, from like 11 to like 2. But then also, I'm home during the day as well. So when they're at school and the wife is at work, it's literally. It's like the control center is my living room. I got like 5 screens. I got like all types of games going on.
That's so cool.
So, yeah. It's not because after a while you get tired of it. Pretty monotonous, especially when like 90% of the games you watch are in some other language you don't understand. So.
That's true.
Yeah, but like I said, I always tell people this. Like the biggest reason why I do it is because there's just a demand for it, and I've always been kind of upset at the NHL how they don't. If you're gonna have 50% of your league be playing in a foreign country, then you got to let us know about these kids. If not, just tell us about every same year. It's the 10 to 15 kids all they talk about. So I just got fed up with it. I said, you know what? I mean, pay some money to get some streams and occasionally travel to see some tournaments, but. And it's a good thing, too, because I'm not the only one that does it. There's a lot of people now that do it, and it kind of puts the onus on the league to finally give us that information, which they still don't. You go to the NFL draft page during draft time for them, and they got scouting reports on 300 people, free, right there on their website. With the NHL, you got to, dig real hard to find it if you can't even find it. So, it's like I said, I have the time to do it, so why not? And then make it free as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's one thing I've noticed, I guess, lately, like you said, is more people are starting to do it. Like, you look back, I guess, even 3 or 4 years ago, it's really just a mock draft or a ranking of the first round, and now you've got people who are going up into the third round. I mean, still, the list of 500 that you put out is so comprehensive, and the fact that you mean, not even 500 guys get drafted, the fact that you go that deep and the coverage of that is just ridiculous. But it seems like it's trending at least in a decent direction. Obviously, the NHL isn't doing too much about it, but you got a lot of people, I think, that are starting to care a little bit more about just past those first 15 guys and really give more coverage.
Yeah, I talked about that a couple of weeks ago. I forgot with who. Where like, when I was, let's say, 17 in the early 90s, and like if someone said to me, "Hey, what do you think about the Rangers' 6th round pick?" I'd be like, "I don't know who the hell they picked. I wouldn't even know." But now it's like that 6th round pick is so scrutinized, and fans have message boards and threads dedicated to that 6th round pick, and they fight over whether or not he's going to make it, and then why it was a bad pick, and I guess there's a huge demand for it. And I agree with what you said. The league is starting to kind of trend towards feeding that beast. And in the meantime, just it's up to the blogosphere and the podcasters to kind of do the work for them. So
the NHL has always been slightly behind everything with other sports. They've always been a little behind everybody else.
Yeah, well, listen, it is what it is. In in Canada, they don't have that problem. But here in the States, we got college football, college basketball. It's just always going to be number 4, number 5 or 6 if you want to count the college games. So, it's like I said, at least here in the States, there's definitely a growing demand, though. I could tell by not just the people that I speak with, but who I interact with, and also the emails I get, the traffic on my website. It's definitely growing. It's people are definitely a lot more interested in the draft at this time of year than they are the award show or whatever stuff that they got. That I understand why the league pumps up the Stanley Cup Finals, but I just wish they understood that there's 29 other fan bases that really they care, but not that much, and they want to focus on the draft, and they should probably kickstart their coverage, bump it up to the front page or the second page of their coverage, whether it be on the website or NHL Network TV, where you can't even find anything draft related unless it's like Jack Hughes versus Kakko, who will be number 1. Like, that's it.
That's it.
So that's what I guess guys like us are for, just to give people that information that they'd love to see the league provide for them.
What made you want to get 500? I mean, I think it's 217 guys get drafted, and then you go way above and beyond and give a whole ranking of 500 guys. What kind of made you want to go that deep and that in depth on it?
Well, I always had a problem with Central Scouting's rankings. Not that they did them, because obviously they're invaluable. How they broke it up. They break it up by position, by continent. I never liked that, because I'm like, well, what so like if in the old days, it used to be, maybe 20 Europeans would get picked. So you knew that whatever the Central Scouting rankings were for North American skaters, that's pretty much how the draft would go. And if you look back at the data from previous Central Scouting rankings, you'd see that most teams never really went too far from them. There'd be exceptions, of course, but usually what Central Scouting said is what the teams kind of listened to or used as a blueprint to do their own scouting. But I felt like, well, is it a strong – Central Scouting wouldn't tell us if it was really a strong European crop, a strong U.S. crop, a strong European goalie crop, whatever. So, I always felt like, let's just do like a big ranking, take all these kids and try to put them into tiers and give people a general idea. So, like, the other thing was a pet peeve of mine, that if they rank a kid, let's say 70th, in a North American skating ranking, the media says he's projected to be a 3rd-round pick. Well, no, not necessarily, because what if the European crop is better? And, so then you got to factor in all those kids and the goalies as well. So I figured if I do a 500, it'll not only give people an idea of what the first, I guess, 217 or 211 would be, but also who's going to be on the outside looking in, and maybe get a better chance to get them drafted next year, so on and so forth. So the whole purpose behind the ranking isn't to say, like, these are the 500 best players in order, and this is how their careers are going to turn out 1 through 500. It's more to give people an idea, like, if a kid is ranked 425, then that means it's a slim to no chance he's going to get ranked. But at the same time, he could sneak into the 7th round. And judging by all the rankings I've done since, I think, 2016, usually like about, maybe 60 to 65% of the kids in my top 211 or 217 actually get drafted. But then you got to factor in, 1 and 2 years after that, where the kids that I ranked in the top 217 that didn't get drafted end up getting picked a year or two later as overages. So explain that one to me. NHL teams will say, well, we weren't sure about it. I'm like, well, if fans could be sure about them, then you should be sure. But that's another story for another time. The other thing is, not to go off the subject, but you see the Red Wings didn't sign 5 of their 11 picks from 2017. Like, what were you doing? Like, if you go back and watch the video of these teams, and they're like, oh, we think he'll be a great Red Wing one day, and then you don't even give him a contract when after 2 years. So maybe start drafting some more Europeans and American kids who are going to go to college, and you get that buffer zone. But there's a lot of weird stuff going on with the draft. I got a lot of beefs with it, but other than that, it's still pretty exciting.
Just looking at the top 100 and the bottom 100, is it harder to place the guys in the top 100, the guys you pretty much almost for certain are going to get drafted, or placing? And I know it's not in order, but like picking those guys and where they're going to go from 400 to 500. What's more difficult than trying to place those guys?
The difficulty for me is that I am always discovering new prospects. So when I do a 500 in a preseason or 400 in a preseason, those are the 4 of the 600 kids that I have a general idea of who they are based on, because when I watch a game, I don't really care about the draft -1s and 2s. I care about the draft year guys, maybe an overager or 2, but I always focus on the first year draft eligibles. So, but my notes are very, very bare. They're thin outside of maybe the top 15 or 20 kids. As the season progresses, I'm really deep into it now. But like by January, in my head, I'm like, all right, I'm set. I have my 600 kids that I watched, and I can now rank them again for the midterms. And then I'll spend the next 3 months, because I'm stubborn, and I'll watch more, and I'll discover new kids. Like, I can't tell you how many times I've watched a game to specifically see one kid and one kid only, and I'll come out being like, 3 other kids were better. I like them, and I got to rank them too. So when you do that, what happens? You got to I can't tell you how many times kids that were ranked 50 get bumped down all the way down to the hundreds, the high hundreds or the low hundreds, simply because I was introduced to 50 prospects that either was selling short or I discovered or someone recommended to me. That's the other thing too, is I always get recommendations from people saying you got to check this kid out, and I'm not embarrassed or too proud to not take that advice. I'd be stupid not to. So again, I feel bad. I wish I had like a scientific formula to rank these kids, but 99.9% of it is just how I feel about these kids when I watch them play. And a kid can make one move on one shift and it could blow me away, and I'm like, all right, that's a special kid right there. I got to watch him, and whether he validates it or not, sometimes I'm pretty stubborn and I won't move him. But to answer your question, it's a constantly evolving process. And, Cale McCarr, I had him ranked like 228 in the preseason, and I caught a little bit of him. I'm like, all right, he's a puck mover in the AJHL, big whoop. What's so special about him? And then people would tell me, no, man, you're sleeping on this kid. And by midseason, he was in my, I think, top 50. And then I used some pretty stupid excuse that, well, I'm worried about him because he's going to UMass and it's a big party school. So that was one of my reasons for being skeptical about what he was doing. Well, like I said, I've evolved as a talent analyst. So, a lot of misses, but at the same time, it's really just for fans to give them a general idea of where kids are going to be picked.
Well, we talked to you last year about a lot of guys who've now made their debuts for the Ducks. Troy Terry was one of them, Sam Steele, Max Jones, Josh Maher. All of them at some point last year came up and played some games for the Ducks. There's a whole new crop of guys that will be making their way. Isaac Lindstrom, Maxime Comtois will finally be playing professional hockey full-time next year, among others of Antoine Morin, Benoit-Olivier Groulx, Blake McLaughlin. How do you feel about the Ducks' current pool of prospects?
Oh, I love them. I love them. I would say right now, if they're not top 5, they're definitely top 10. If you don't just count the kids that didn't make their pro debut. I mean, this year in particular, more so than any previous year, I wanted to focus on NHL prospects as well. And it just became a bridge too far for me, so I ended up dropping it mid-season. But I was really tracking the progress of rookies, and it amazed me. There was one game, I think the Ducks had 7 rookies playing in the lineup, and it was early in the season where they were giving Comtois a regular shift. Sam Steele was playing, Isaac Lindstrom was playing, Kiefer Sherwood, I think, he was playing. So I think it's great. I think that that they were able to let these kids come up and play. When Troy Terry came up the first time, it was a little bit of a struggle. They sent him back down. Then he came up and was fine. So really you can't. If you're going to miss the playoffs, I know that it's a kind of demanding fan base because of the winning, the perennial winning all the time, or at least qualifying, getting to the conference finals a lot. I understand that it might not be an easy sell, but when you look at what they've assembled, the fact that they're giving these kids, I think what they lack though is that they lack that one real superstar, that one superstar prospect, and guess what? They're going to get that this year. So it's whatever they've done I've always respected the Ducks too, because they don't trade away first round picks unless they really have to. And even in 2017 when they traded it for, was it Eves, I think is who they traded it for?
Yeah, it was a second. I think it turned into a first because he re-signed.
Yeah. So, but they got Comtois and Morand in that draft. And then you look at 2016 where they had, Max Jones still a little bit raw, but Sam Steele is great. Josh Mahura is one of my favorite, post-drafted prospects in the league. And he would have been a first round if he didn't have injury issues. So overall, you have to say that they've done a great job at the draft table, really phenomenal job. And now they're going to get a top 10 pick. It's a good time, I guess, to be a prospects fan in Anaheim.
One guy that we talked about last year before we knew he was going to get drafted by the Ducks, I think a lot of people too had him as a guy to watch, was Blake McLaughlin, and he ended up falling to the Ducks in the third round. Had some injury problems this year, but he put together a pretty solid season with the U of Minnesota. Do you think he's still considered a steal when the Ducks got him in the third round?
Oh, yeah, I had him as a first rounder, and that was my final ranking, and I got a chance to see him play for Chicago. Actually, he caught my eye first when he was with Grand Rapids, and they were playing Casey Middlestat's Eden Prairie Powerhouse in the semifinals, and he was on a line with, I forgot the kid's name already. He was on a line with, I forgot the two guys' names. I think it might have been Cates, might have been one of them, and the other guy. But anyway, he was so dominant. I'm like, all right, I got to pay attention to this kid. And then I got a chance to see him live playing the NTDP, and he played the NTDP when they sent Jack Hughes and Turcotte and Caufield to Russia for the U18. So that U18 team was really the U17 team that McLaughlin was playing against, and he was just so dominant. He outplayed Zegras, and Zegras was great that game. And I'm like, okay, so I got to get this kid somehow in my first round. The thing about what he did with Minnesota this year is Minnesota is a terrible offensive team. They were basically a one-line team. They struggled to generate offense. Even when Casey Middlestat was there last year, maybe it's cyclical. I don't know if the Big Ten is just not a big offensive-minded conference like it used to be. And you're talking about a freshman that shows up there, and he's one of your top players. College hockey, they definitely, unless you're a Jack Eichel or Paul Kariya type, they're going to showcase the upperclassmen and give those minutes to them because they feel like they deserve them or whatever. But McLaughlin made a lot of upperclassmen lose ice time because that's how good he was. So I think, you got a winger who's a playmaker. Some might say he could be a center one day, but really, to get him at 79 was a great pick for them. I really like him a lot.
So Benoit-Olivier Groulx he's kind of taken his game to another level this season. He put up 31 goals. He led the Mooseheads in assists with 49 assists. But he was always known for his two-way game. Do you think maybe this season kind of gave him that step up towards being more of an offensive forward and developed his game more, or is this maybe just a one-off for him?
Well, I think he's progressing. He was a high Quebec League pick. He was always considered to be a top prospect. And I thought that his stats last year were not really indicative of his skill set because he played on such a deep team. And Halifax, again, this year was a deep team where they could roll three scoring lines, not one scoring line and then maybe some support after that. They actually have three legit scoring lines, puck-moving defensemen, things like that. So the fact that he was able to have a 30-30 season last year, but also be a two-way center, the guy that killed penalties, took the late game draws, things like that. He seemed like more of a situational guy, but I think I even wrote in my scouting reports on him hey, this kid could shoot the puck. He's got some offensive flair about him, but it's definitely good when you make that big of a jump from, let's say, I think what he have like 50 points,
50 to 80 pretty much.
Yeah, to go from like 50 to 80 in the goal department, he didn't jump that much, I guess, but in the assists he did. And then on top of that, he was very good for them in the postseason. You know, Halifax was hosting the Memorial Cup. They didn't have that great of a final against Rudin Noranda, but they made up for it in the Memorial Cup. So, yeah, I mean, look at all the centers, though, the Ducks have. You have to wonder, like, one of these kids, whether it be Lundestrom or Groulx or Steele or, you know, if Terry ends up playing center, if that's what the plan is for him, or Moran, like, where are they going to put these kids? What are these kids are going to have to move to wing, get traded, or be a fourth line checker? And but I think, you know, competition is a great thing for prospects. You want these kids to compete each other because it sorts out the weak and those who can't, measure up to those that are better than them. So I think just another example of a prospect who did exactly what he wanted to do and what a lot of people expected him to do, which was take that next step and be a dominant player on his team and in the league as well.
Hey, so one of the big fan favorites here already, one of mine and Eddie's favorites too, is Maxime Comtois. And, you know, he got sent back to Drummondville this past season, and it was clear that he was just way too damn good for junior hockey, putting up hat trick after hat trick. Do you think he's already going to be an impact player in playing in the NHL, or do you think he needs a little more marinating here in the AHL next season with the Gulls?
I mean, he looked pretty darn good to me when he was playing with the Ducks in those 10 games. So I know that he plays with a lot of reckless abandon. He gets hurt a lot. He's also very undisciplined. So those are two things. I think we even talked about that last year, that with Max Jones as well. They have to just learn that they can impact the game in more ways than being abrasive and dirty and what have you. And Comtois was, you know, remember, this is a kid that some people thought would have been a top 10 pick. 2017 wasn't that great of a draft crop, but in the beginning, I think all of us had him in the first round somewhere, and he just didn't have that great of a draft season. And in the end, maybe that might have motivated him, the fact that he did go 50th or 55th. I forgot where he went, but if he went somewhere in the middle of the second round instead of, in the first round like everyone expected him to go in early in the season, maybe that was like a little bit of a wake-up call. But you're looking at a 200-foot menace. My goodness, tough guy to play against. He didn't care whether he was hitting veterans or rookies. He was getting under everybody's skin, and then he on top of that, he put up points. What did he put up, like 10 points? Or if you look at the metrics that I look at for rookies is always scoring chances and shots, because like any rookie could be on a fourth line and just do fourth line things. But, you know, if you want to be a real impact rookie, you got to be around the net. You got to show your coaching staff that good things happen when you're on the ice. And to me, Comtois was easily, I mean, it was a small sample size, but easily Comtois was one of the best rookies in the NHL during that period, outside of maybe, Elias Pettersson and maybe like one or two others. So perfect role player. He plays that heavy style that they like. He's got guys like Corey Perry and Ryan Getzlaff to mentor him, to teach him the ways of getting under everybody's skin, I guess on a more elite level.
Very common here, yes.
Yeah. No, I like him a lot. He's going to be – listen, the other Southern California teams or the other California teams are going to hate playing against this kid. I'm telling you, he's that's how he's wired.
They seem to every draft they seem to bring in one or two guys like that, whether it's Max Jones, Maxime Comtois. Benoit Groulx can be kind of like that sometimes too.
Sure. And, he plays a heavy game if he needs to.
Yeah, and I think even Hunter Drew, he got suspended a couple times this year. So they always seem to find that one guy. But, we mentioned they've got a lot of centers, got a lot of guys coming up. We mentioned Moran and Groulx, McLaughlin, Isaac Lindstrom at times too. They're all waiting to get into the Ducks system in the AHL next year. Which of these guys do you feel are kind of most ready to jump into that spot in the NHL?
I think Lundestrom is definitely ready. He played 2 full years in the SHL. And then he, obviously was with the Ducks for what was about like 20 games or something like that. Yeah. So he got a pretty good taste of the North American game. The thing about Lundestrom is he could impact the game without scoring. Obviously, because he's a first-round pick, you want him to provide a little bit of offense. But he's a very speedy guy. He could be a checker, excellent penalty killer. Could apply pressure on the forecheck and things like that. What I liked about Lundestrom, to me, was back in the World Juniors, was when Elias Anderson got hurt, and he had to kind of like step into that role as the go-to guy. And then, I guess, similar players. I think Lundstrom's a little bit quicker than Elias Anderson is, and he was a big reason why the Swedes went as far as they did, and I think where they lose to Canada in the gold medal game. So he's a guy, and listen, Sam Steele too is another guy. When the way he played, he's a power play specialist. You always need someone like that. He's a playmaker. He's got very good speed. Obviously, his vision, his hockey sense is high. Mahura's another one. I think if it was maybe 10 years ago, I would say that, you got to take their time, and the Ducks want to compete again probably and make the playoffs. I don't see why they can't compete for a playoff spot in the West, and have 5 or 6 rookies in the lineup again. I don't understand why they can't happen. If all things go right and they get good long seasons out of their veterans and they earn their paychecks like they're supposed to, then keep letting these kids play. There was periods where the Ducks looked really good with them in the lineup. So, you got to figure that it is going to be a little crowded, though. They might have to convince some kids to spend an extra year in junior that they don't want to do that. But, obviously, if you look at who they've drafted the last few years, they've gone pretty CHL heavy. So only a few. I think Bedini was one kid, Perbix, and then, of course, McLaughlin. But the rest, from a skater standpoint, mostly CHL kids. So they have that age limit. They got that AHL rule as well. So it'll be interesting to see what they do. And plus, on top of that, you got this draft as well. They might have, if they take some overages, they might have some room for them down there too. So, but I would say, to answer your question again, Mahura, Steele, Lundestrom, of course, Comtois. I think they're ready. Why not give them a bottom 6 role and just take it from there?
I would think the same thing. We've Eddie and I and our one of our other co-hosts, Jason. We've always talked about, let the young guys come up and play a bit. You got to get away from that old style of hockey where they're just like, nah. You got to go with the guy I can trust. Like, hey, these kids are better than those guys. They got to come up and play the game. Going back here a couple of years in draft years anyway, Brendan Guhle was acquired by the Ducks in a trade for another hometown favorite, Ducks favorite, Brandon Montour. The Ducks got him and a first-round pick for this year, the 29th pick. Do you think that the winner of that trade, and it's kind of a French question, do you think the winner of that trade becomes what becomes of that pick this year?
I didn't like that trade for the Ducks at all. I liked it for the Sabres because they got the better player. I understood why they made the trade, but Brandon Montour. Yeah, I liked them. Obviously I don't watch the Ducks as much as you guys do, but I felt that you got a young, mobile, two-way defenseman like that is still pretty manageable from a contract standpoint. Guhle. The thing about Guhle is that 2015 draft produces a lot of talent. It's one of the best. It's arguably the best draft since 2003, and in the end, it might turn out to be the best one recently, at least. And I felt like he just never really made that step. Now I think he played, didn't he? He played a couple of games.
He got an oblique injury. Yeah, he ended up getting hurt.
Was he paired with Manson? I think the game that I saw he was playing with Manson.
Okay, he was with Manson for a bit. Started with Manson, then he moved with Fowler, and they moved Fowler over to the right side.
I think that Guhle is a decent prospect. I know that they haven't drafted many defensemen. The Ducks always known for their getting these great defensemen. I think based on, if I can remember my report cards, that they really haven't drafted a whole lot of defensemen. They got Mahura was one, but Jacob Larson, his other kid, he might not. I guess the jury's still out on him. But I felt like they got Guhle because they needed someone in the pool, and he's kind of just there. I don't know what his upside really is at this point because I really want him to take that next step. In Buffalo, they were considering him the best defense prospect after Rasmus Dahlin. So I think ultimately it's going to be that first-round pick that's going to be the important piece of that trade. But if I had to do it all over again, I wouldn't have made that trade. I would have kept Montour. But like I said, they have their reasons. I'm sure the fans have their reasons as well. But you still get, I guess, a B-level prospect and a first-round pick. So in the end, it's not that bad, I guess.
It's been like 50-50 split here. Like some people hated that trade, some people love that trade. It's just, it's been right down the middle with almost everyone I've talked to. So it's just interesting to hear from your perspective.
Well, I mean, like, can you blame, like, why would you want Montour gone? Could you really, with all the issues that the Ducks ended up having, was he part of the problems? I think it's a lot more than that. So I know there's always a fall guy or two, and fans turn on a player, and as a Ranger fan, Tanner Glass, that guy, man, is like, he's the reason for the downfall of everything. Tanner Glass, the fourth liner that the coach liked, so no, but I think still you got a first round pick. So, the fact that you got two in a very good draft, the Ducks don't really have, like, I guess, a major need from a forward standpoint. Defense, but it's not a great draft, I guess, that great of a draft for defense. So if they go and they get a home run forward, which they should with their first pick, then they could swing for the fences with a defense prospect. And let's say that defense prospect is Moritz Seider, or let's say it's Cam York, who's a California kid. I mean, then that's a home run. Then, like, if you have a chance to get a Cam York, then maybe trading Brandon Montour is worth it. So from that standpoint, I could see why people would be happy about the trade.
Yeah, I think looking back on it kind of hinges a lot on what Brandon Guhle becomes in the end. I think Brandon Montour is pretty much at where we think he's going to be at, unless he gets a better opportunity in Buffalo, which I'm sure he might. And then, what that pick becomes. Unfortunately, it turned out to be number 29. We hoping it was going to be a little bit higher. But let's move on to the draft, because that's obviously what you've been covering for the last few months to this year's draft. And there was a lot of news. I guess I don't know why there was a lot of news about this, but Kappo Kakko decided not to go to the draft combine, and I think 20 stories in one day popped up about what that meant for the draft. Do you think it plays much of a role in his draft stock and the battle for the number one overall pick, or is this just people picking up on news because Kappo Kakko's name is stuck to it?
It's just news. There's just stuff to talk about. That's it. I mean, anyone who has watched Kappo Kakko play, whether it be just the first week of the season or the last week of the World Championships, clearly, he is on the same level as Jack Hughes. He deserves to be the number one overall pick. I'm not saying he is going to be. I think Hughes deserves it as well. But I can't, like, the combine is really just an opportunity for the teams to take a break, to reconvene. They have their breakup days and everyone goes about their ways. Certain teams put a little bit more emphasis on the draft when it comes to preparation. Certain general managers are more involved than in some cases, like Carolina. You got the owner involved in the draft process. So, I mean, oh God, can you imagine? I had a great season. So, but it remains to be seen, like, draft wise, how it turns out for them. But anyway, I don't think it matters. It really doesn't. He's such a special talent. Jack Hughes skipping the physical stuff because he's just worn out. Like, you gotta, look when they had the combine a couple weeks before the draft. It's not like the NFL where they do position related testing. It's all like, the more they do it, the less interested I am in it. This year for the first time, I didn't do a roll up of, like, the scores of the events, even though the fans like it. Asking these questions about what do you do if there's a python in the room. They asked Spencer Knight. I talked about this on NHL radio yesterday. They asked Spencer Knight, what do you like better, stopping pucks or making saves? Like, what kind of questions are those? And Spencer Knight is a very intelligent kid. I mean, he's a prep school educated. He comes from a really good family. Intense competitor. Hates to lose. Is a student of the game. And I hope it comes out that a team didn't draft him and he becomes like this Hall of Famer, and the team is like, well, we didn't draft him because he answered the goalie question wrong. And I mean, sometimes there needs to be someone in the room. It's like Chernobyl, where, like, all the technicians are scared to, like, tell the truth because they don't want to get fired. Like, someone has to be in the room and say, are we really going to ask this question? Are we going to ask a 17-year-old kid, what would you do if you're in a room and there's a python and you're with four other people? What do you do?
That's an insane question.
And they asked that to John Farinacci, who's going to Harvard. So they asking a Harvard kid, like, clearly he has a very, very superior brain, and you're going to ask him that, like, what does it have to do with being a playmaking center? I hope one of these kids, like, said to them, another rant I'm going on about the draft, but I'm hoping one of these kids, he looked at them and said, "That's a stupid question. Can we move on?" They won't do that because they're kids and they're smart and they were trained well. They're not 45-year-old grumpy men like me, but it's just like I said. So to answer your question, no, I don't think it'll have any impact. I think Kakko is going to go where he deserves to go.
So speaking, we got to talk about the 1-2, Hughes and Kakko, or however you rank them, right?
Sure.
Some people have Kakko number 1. But the consensus overall, the people that we follow don't. I mean, even though we had a great World Championships, what is it that didn't put him over the hump to be ranked number 1 over Hughes?
I just think that Hughes was the number 1 for so many years. Kakko was just another name. I got a chance to see him play at the Five Nations, and very impressive skill set, but he never really came across as a unstoppable, game-breaking, I got to go buy a $250 ticket to see Kappo Kakko play kind of a thing. Whereas Jack Hughes, the minute you watch him play, the first time you see him step on the ice, I've been following sports for a long time, and there's just certain athletes that when you go see them play for the first time, whether you know about them or not, you could just tell like the impact that they have not only on the game but on their teammates, on the crowd, and Jack Hughes was that guy. I mean, and when you do the things that he's done, he's smashed every single record you could think of. He's Austin Matthews, and the difference in ages isn't that much. All those guys were late birthdays. Eichel, Kane, Kessel, Matthews, they were all late birthdays, so they couldn't play in the NTDP in their draft year. But Hughes was, I think, a June birthday or maybe a May. So you're talking about a difference of like 4 or 5 months in age compared to like when Austin Matthews was tearing up the NTDP versus when Hughes is done. And Hughes had like a 2.23 point per game average, and that's against the USHL. That's against like elite college programs, guys with teams with 24, 25-year-old guys on them. So because he was able to do that, and he validated the reputation that he had, he was an easy, obvious choice to be ranked number 1. The thing about Kakko was that he started tearing it up in the beginning of the year, slowed down a little bit. So he was just like there, like the number 2, number 3 guy. And then he had and his World Juniors were pretty nondescript. Outside of the golden goal, it's not like he was really dominating from a shift to shift or game to game basis. But that goal was like, well, I don't know. I mean, Hughes is okay, but this Kakko guy, let's learn more about him. And then when he came back from the World Juniors, man, he just destroyed the Liga. He destroyed it. He scored like, I think, 3/4 of his goals in that second half. TPS is a pretty good team, but he was basically unseating a lot of talented veterans, toying with adult age defensemen, toying with them. And then you carry that over to the World Championships, and what he was doing to Canadian NHL players and American NHL
the Ryan
players.
Suter one, yeah, I saw him just skate around and toy with him. That was brutal.
Yeah. So that's why. But Hughes, that last game against Russia, and I said a little bit of a vulgar tweet, but I had to kind of get my message across, is that like the fact that Jack Hughes had his best game. He was exhausted and all, but he saved his best game against basically a Russian NHL All-Star team with a bunch of Hall of Famers on it. To me, that was like the message, like, hey, I'm not going anywhere. Like, this Kakko guy's pretty good, but I'm not going anywhere. So yeah, but again, Kakko won the gold, so people are using that thing while Kakko wins golds, and Jack Hughes has to settle for 3rd and 4th place. But the toughest decision is going to be with Ray Shero and the Devils, because they can make a mistake. The Rangers can't make a mistake because they're just going to take whoever the guy that the Devils don't take, and they can always say, well, listen, we wanted the better guy, but the Devils took him, so we ended up with the next best guy and he stunk, or vice versa with the Devils. So normally I get on the media for creating this 1 versus 2 controversy, and I wasn't trying to start one last year with Svechnikov. I just really loved Svechnikov as a player, and he kind of validated that for me this year. But This is a legitimate 1 versus 2 debate. It's not Nico versus Nolan or Jack versus Connor. Like, this is legit. I really, the difference is so thin, if there even is one, and you could make cases for both. But I'm going to lean towards Hughes because of the dynamism and he's just got that potential to be like a jersey selling kind of a marketable kind of a 100-point type of player. So.
How do you feel about the comparison being made right now between Hughes and Kakko and Matthews and Laine? Do you see any similarities in that, or is it kind of like what you just said? It's not even close to what it is now.
No, because Laine had red flags. Laine had red flags. We ignored them because he was an elite goal scorer. He was, I compared him to Ovechkin in terms of his one-time, his shot release. But he had red flags. He gave the coach the middle finger. He took shifts off. People wondered about his compete level. Could he do anything but score goals? And anyone who's been following the Western Conference and watched Winnipeg, when he's not on his game, he's just useless. I mean, he's been benched, he's been scratched, but when he's at the top of his game, or even kind of attempting to be at the top of his game, he's an elite goal scorer. Kakko doesn't have any of these red flags. Kakko is like a mature, well-spoken, well-mannered. There's no Fortnite addiction. There's, not that Fortnite addiction is bad, but, if you're Patrick Laine and you're in a goal slump and you're spending more time playing Fortnite than maybe going over film, then I could see why people would be upset with that. But, the Matthews-Laine thing is an easy comparison because you have an American from the NTDP or, an American and then a Finn, an American forward and a Finnish forward, or an American center and a Finnish center. So I could see that. But as far as I never believed that Laine was going to be first overall pick. I know some people thought that, and they even had him in their rankings. But this is no joke. This Hughes Kakko thing is not going to be decided until when the pick is announced. Then no one's going to know. I mean, it's that interesting. I think with Matthews, we all knew. It was just maybe the media tried to make it more of a more suspenseful than it was. But 2 players, 0 red flags. I mean, you could say what you want about Hughes' size, but he debunked that at the World Championships. You could say what you want about Hughes' shot. He debunked that at the U18 World Championships. It's actually, this was the out of all the years I've been doing this year was the most fun, easily the most fun, because the debates are so hot and so testy that it makes you work harder to make sure that you got your shot group tightened.
Well, you're talking about guys with red flags, and we know Hughes and Kakko are going to go 1-2, but a guy who seemed to be a consensus number 3 for most of the year in Podkolzin has kind of fallen a bit in some people's rankings. People still have him at 3. Some people still believe he's a consensus 3, but I've seen rankings where he's fallen as far as 10. Some people have him outside the top 10. Are there red flags there? Like, what's the case with him falling off that consensus number 3?
All right, the red flag, the biggest red flag for me is his health, and it's because a lot hasn't been disclosed. I get a lot of if you guys have followed me for a while, I'm not a name dropper. Like, I don't say scouts told me or GMs told me this. I don't do that, but I do get contacted by people, and a lot of people were telling me this year, and I could just tell because I would tweet about it. I'm like, I think Podkolzin's hurt, and they were telling me that, and this is, I guess we could say on the record, but kind of off the record. I'm not going to reveal my sources, but that Podkolzin played with a significant amount of injuries, and his coaches have been telling him, like, dude, sit and don't. And he's such a fierce competitor that he's like, no, I'm playing. And so when you get that type of dedication, you're also going to have limitations on what you could do on the ice. And so I was very, I guess, disappointed in the fact that he didn't dominate the U18s. I felt like the way that Russia, if you watch the World Junior A Challenge where Podkolzin was the best player in that tournament, they played the championship game against Team USA, and they wanted that gold so bad. Russians haven't won a gold at a U18 event in a while, or even a U20 event. They wanted it so bad, and they lost by a goal. And Podkolzin was basically shadowed and checked by Ryan Johnson, who's I think he's another California kid. His dad was Craig Johnson, who was involved in the Gretzky trade. And Ryan Johnson smothered him. Podkolzin was really frustrated. And you could just tell when they were having the ceremony how mad they were. So I thought that they were going to use that as motivation to go to the U18s and listen. They beat Team USA, but I still think that Podkolzin, I wanted more out of him. And in a way, he saved his best for last. That gold medal game against the Swedes, he was fantastic. So I'm not worried about him as an NHL player. I think that whoever drafts him is going to get a top line. Just every team is going to hate playing this guy. He's that kind of a talent. It's just because of the injuries and because of the or alleged injuries and because of the travel, and he bounced around in 3 leagues. So you got a kid, put it this way. If he played in the CHL this year, I know it's hypothetical, but if Podkolzin played in the CHL this year, like Svechnikov did last year, and he played 60-something games and he scored 40 goals and had 80 points, we wouldn't be having this conversation right now. There'd be no red flags. So it's like, well, look at his production. He dominated. But the fact was that he was he's also, I think he's a late June birthday. So he's only 2 months away from being eligible for next year's draft. And he plays on a very competitive team, the SKA organization. And even the SKA 1946 junior team, they got a lot of talent on there. So he was only spent maybe a few weeks with them. He goes to the VHL, which is like their AHL. And he was, not really producing, but he was playing pretty good hockey and showed spurts. But then from there, he gets promoted to the KHL, and he goes to the KHL, and he's sitting next to Kovalchuk, or not Kovalchuk, Datsuk. And, what is he playing, like 3 seconds a game for like a week? And then he has the World Juniors, and then the World Junior A Challenge, and then he's got the Five Nations tournament. So all this kid did all year was bounce around, and there's got to be something. I know you could say that Kakko had the same thing, but in a way, Kakko played the whole season with TPS. He just took little tiny breaks, one for the World Juniors and then one for the excuse me. And then his season ended and he went to World Championships. Whereas, Podkolzin and Russia, the travel there is brutal. So I'm not trying to make excuses for him, but when you watch him at his best, why would you knock him down in your rankings? Why would you say that, oh, well, his production's not great? When he's at his best and when he's healthy, he's easily the 3rd best player in the draft. It's not even a question. But unfortunately, he's kind of, whether he agreed to doing all this, having such a busy schedule or, but the other thing is too, I think what scares people is that he did his quotes. He came out and said, he was in Canada for the Holinka. He was in Canada for the World Juniors, and he basically said a comment like, well, I understand what the big deal is with Canada and North America. Like, I'm pretty happy here in SKA. I got a great club, a great training facility. And then you go to his Instagram account. He's got a girlfriend. He's very seems like he's a family-oriented kind of a kid. So the not having any interest to come over and play in the CHL or, AHL or whatever, that might turn some teams off as well. So we'll see. I think, but I'm going to stand by what I said. I'll take it to my grave that he is the 3rd best player in the draft. And I'm going to knock him down a little bit in my rankings, only because Trevor Zegras and Bowen Byram really showed me something. So I'm going to knock him down to 5 begrudgingly because I love the kid a lot. But I in my head, I think that when all is said and done, he's going to be the 3rd best player to come out of this draft.
Yeah, I mean, you said in your mock draft that there's always that one highly touted prospect that seems to fall. Last year, I guess you could say that was probably Joe Veleno, who fell almost out of the 1st round. And this year, I guess if anybody had the chance to fall from a high spotter from the top 10, it would probably be him.
Yeah, I don't think – but I have a feeling – and I don't have any insider information because the teams are pretty tight-lipped about the draft stuff. But I think that – like we saw with Brady Tkachuk, a perfect example last year where the people used the stats argument against him. Well, he wasn't as good as a freshman like Jack Eichel, and, he didn't produce like a college elite top pick should produce. And, and he went out and he won a rookie season he had this year. So, my opinion, he should be the runner-up of the Calder, not Deline. I mean, Brady Tkachuk playing as a rookie on a terrible team like Ottawa. But again, it just goes to show you that sometimes the teams don't care. They don't care what the public says. They don't care what the media says. They don't care what the stats say. They say, you know what? We love this kid. We stopped scouting him in March because we're so sold on him. And, when they go around the room and they ask people for the consensus opinions, I think there's at least a few teams, at least 2 or 3, picking in that top 10 that are like, we're stupid if we let this kid, slip through our fingers. So we'll have to just, I guess, wait and see.
And you look at the top 10 this year, and even the first round, and we talked about the NTDP a fair amount so far, but they could potentially have 5 guys go in the top 10, and as many as maybe even 8 or 9 taken in the first round. I mean, this program's always developed good players, but how far has it come in recent years? And this probably has to be the best crop they've almost ever had.
It's the best. I'll put it this way: it's the best junior team in NHL history, in NHL draft history, without a doubt. I mean, no team. The most one team had representation in the top 10 of a draft was 3. I think it happened a couple times in the early days of the draft where one junior team hit it. I mean, if Spencer Knight is, in terms of draft hype, draft resume, he's on Carey Price's level, and Carey Price went 5th overall. So I know that you got the 3 kids from the WHL, well, the 4 kids if you count Bo and Byram. But you could have 6. Technically, you could have 6 in the top 10. That's how crazy it is. If you look at Cole Caufield and Spencer Knight, and then I wouldn't say Cam York will go title, so maybe 5. But really a phenomenal. The one thing, listen, I've been really close with that NTDP for a while. I don't think we're going to see something like it in a long time. It's one of those situations that it's just a generational thing or a birth year where these kids, it's magic. And it was magic dating back to last year. It's just you. So, yes, USA Hockey is definitely on the way up. The USHL is going to have a great year in the draft. They should, at least. They're getting a lot of import players from Europe. But the NTDP, this particular NTDP was special. And I got to give Pete Krupski credit, the play-by-play guy for the NTDP. He told me early last year when I was talking about Wallstrom and Farabee and all the under 18 NTDP types that were draft eligible. He was like, Steve, you got to watch the 17s. The 17s are going to be phenomenal. And beyond Jack Hughes, and I listened to him and I went out and I saw him play, and I'm like, my good, when you watch these kids play, and I know that they didn't win the gold. I mean, they lost in a shootout, but these kids are the way that they execute plays, not just like plays that you draw up on a chalkboard. The chemistry that they have with one another, that sixth sense where they could all sense each other. I'm not exaggerating when I say this, and I'd like to consider myself a wannabe hockey historian. Like, in the history of hockey that I've been watching, there have only been two teams that distributed and moved the puck and were imposed their will on teams the way that the NTDP did this year, and it was the '80s Oilers and the Red Army teams of the '80s that I saw with the KLM line, and then of course the Gretzky and Messier Curry Oilers. That's how surgical these guys were. So it's no surprise that you're going to have anywhere from 5 to 6 of these kids picked in the top 11 or 12. I mean, it's really, to be honest with you, who has it tough is the teams picking in that group. Because how do you when you break it all down, it might have to come down to need, which is crazy to think if you're picking 3rd or 4th or 5th overall. But as great as these WHL kids are, Dylan Cousins is a very good prospect, Kirby Doc, Peyton Krebs, who I like a lot. Watching these NTDP, and it's not like I'm biased. Like, really, the NTDP last year weren't all that great outside of the 2 or 3 kids. The year before that wasn't all that great outside of the 2. These kids this year are great. You're going to see, I would say, at least three of the kids that are going to get picked from their program are going to go to the Hall of Fame. And I'm being, I think, generous with that, or I'm being cautious with that, because that's how special they are. So, it's not hyperbole. These kids really, and look at all the records that they smashed. I mean, Cam York, I think, had 2 8-point games this year. Cole Caufield scored 70 goals. Alex Turcotte was a 2-point per game player, most of it without Jack Hughes. Matt Boldy, playing on second, third line minutes is, the best two-way forward in the draft. Trevor Zegras is basically, I compared him to Matt Barzal. You come to think of it, I think he might be better than Matt Barzal draft year wise. So, it's going to be interesting to see. But really, really historic group. I'm happy for them though. You talk to the parents, the parents will tell you like these kids work their asses off to get to this point. So you got to be happy for them.
No, that's awesome. That makes me really happy as an American hockey fan to hear that, especially with those comparisons. And that's one of the guys I want to talk to you about is Cole Caufield. I mean, the NHL's definitely gone away from that. He's too small to play. You got guys like Johnny Gaudreau in this league. But does his size, only being 5'7", $150, is that something that's going to hurt his draft stock, or is he just too darn good of a goal scorer for that doesn't even matter for him?
It depends on how an NHL team's front office is constructed, how a scouting staff is constructed. Because if you got an old school guy, and this is you could say this about any entity or occupation or profession, where if you have an old school way of thinking, then you're going to do things an old school way, and sometimes it's a good thing, and sometimes it's a bad thing. If you have a front office where it's outside the box thinkers, I think you have some scouts who have been around the block a few times but understand talent. They're going to say, listen, like, we just had a 5'7" kid that we passed on score 40 goals in the NHL, and that's Alex DeBrincat, who was a second-round pick. And when a lot of bloggers, and I'm not going to toot my own horn, but a lot of those bloggers were saying, like, hey, watch this kid DeBrincat play. He's not a Connor McDavid, passenger or a Dylan Strome passenger. This kid is legit. And, you kind of just know that in certain war rooms, teams are like, hey, he's too small. If you watch Cole Caufield play, he's not like a finesse-only kid. He kills penalties. He's very tenacious on the puck. He won't back down from a challenge. Sometimes these smaller kids, they know that they're small, and they don't like that moniker. They don't like that tag attached to them. So they compete hard, and they fight for pucks, and they battle for positioning in front of the net. I mean, how are you going to turn away or turn down that shot release, that accuracy? Shooting off the pass is a big thing. I like to see people shoot off the pass. The goalies nowadays are too quick. They're too fast. So when you get that cross-ice pass, you got to shoot it off the pass, because if it would take too long to tee it up, the goalie's already in position and you barely have any net to shoot at. And the thing about when you watch kids shooting off the pass nowadays, almost always they shoot it either back into the goalie or they shoot it wide, where you got a yawning cage. The coaches and the armchair quarterbacks will tell you got to hit that near post. You got to tuck it right inside that near post. Well, Kakko does it and Caufield does it all the time. I mean, they'll make mistakes every now and again, but to shoot off the pass with that kind of accuracy and at that age, it only means he's going to get better. You're not going to degrade or lose. You're not going to lose shot accuracy unless you have a significant injury to your wrist or your hand or something. So you're basically the teams that are going to pass on him. They have to accept the fact that they're passing on a potential 50-goal scorer. It's just plain and simple. You might be passing on the next Mike Bossy or the next Yari Curry or the next, I don't want to say Alex Ovechkin, but I mean, he's that good. But the thing is with this draft is you can make strong cases for all those kids that go ahead of him. So it's not like Cole Caufield will be the far superior player out of this draft, and everybody else that was picked ahead of him were kind of just there. You're going to have a lot of kids with star careers in that group. So, but again, it's tough to be that scout or that scouting director, that GM that agrees to pass on him, because he's, especially if he slips. If he goes to like 15 to 18, if he's going to make teams pay for that. I believe that he's that kind of kid. A lot of kids on draft day, when they say, I'm going to make this team regret passing me, and they stink. But I think a guy like Cole Caufield will make people regret passing on him.
Yeah, if he falls that far, you kind of get the sense it's going to be like a David Pastrnak or Matt Barzal falling to the mid-teens and then coming out and being superstars in this league. He kind of has that feel about him. But I want to talk about a couple of guys that you had that were big risers in your rankings from December to April, and the two of them were Ville Heinola and Philip Tomasino. What did you see from them that warranted such a big jump from the third and fourth round up into your first round?
Well, Heinola, I was concerned about his size, because when I watched him in the beginning of the season, he played in the Champions Hockey League, which is a great tournament, by the way. I wish the NHL could, the North American Junior Leagues could do something like it, where you take all the elite European teams, maybe 4 from each country, and you put them all into a round robin tournament. And teams realize that it's just really for bragging rights. So they play their young kids more than they would, let's say, in the regular season. So when I watched Heinola play, I'm like, you're a very good puck mover. Ooh, he's exciting. He's got pretty good wheels, and he's got a great shot. Outstanding decision maker when he gets the puck up high. But I just felt like, I want to see a better compete level from him, and he's really not winning his one-on-one battles that much. So let me be cautious with him. And I was more heavily favored towards his teammate, Honka, and Anthony Honka, who blew me away with his puck moving and his skill and his finesse and his playmaking, what have you. And maybe a little bit more cleaner defensively. But that's the beginning of the season. It just goes back to what I said about how things change, and watching more and more of Heinola. I mean, I had people, the Finnish friends of mine or followers that I have saying, why are you ranking Honka ahead of Heinola? You're crazy. And so I went back and I watched film, and I saw that they were right. I mean, this kid is just a fantastic puck mover. There's a little bit of Rasmus Dahlin in his game. I'm not going to say he's going to be like Rasmus Dahlin, but there's like a flair, a cockiness about him when he has the puck. It's almost like on a Brian Leetch kind of a level. And I could say that because I watched Brian Leetch play when he was 18 years old until the time he retired, where, he's pump faking, he's making behind the back no-look passes. There's a certain play, I don't know if there's a proper term for it, but where the point man has the puck up high and he gets pressure coming at him, and then they execute like a little bit of a give and go with a forward. So the forward and the defenseman switch off, but the guy stays high. The opponent stays high, and it creates this huge gap in the middle of the ice, so like more towards the slot. And every time I watch games, I'm like, I want these young defensemen to attack that. If they get the puck up high and there's a 2-on-1 kind of a struggle going on at the boards, that defenseman needs to have the guts to release and go to the middle of the ice and I guess hope that his forward gives him the puck and traps that defender or that opponent. And Heinola does this all the time, and it's a very rare thing. Dahlin does it. Brian Leetch used to do it all the time. Phil Housley used to do it back in the day. So when you have this type of IQ, this hockey sense, as they say, to understand that there's risks, and then there are really good risks, and he's just to me, he's a special talent. And if I could, I'd have him in the top 10, but it's kind of crowded up there. So I'm going to keep him in the, like the top 15. And then Tomasino was a kid. I thought that Tomasino was a very vanilla kind of a player, where he had speed and he had a shot, but other than that, he forced pucks a lot and whatever. And then the more I watched Niagara, I realized, like, this kid isn't being he's not being sheltered. He's given tough minutes, a lot of defensive zone starts. And when you have a lot of defensive zone starts, it's not easy to, how are you going to approach that faceoff? You're going to approach the faceoff like, oh my God, we have to defend, we're in trouble. Well, you're going to approach that faceoff as, hey, we could catch these guys sleeping. Let's break out and head up ice and catch them in a odd man situation. And that's what Tomasino, by watching him more, what I discovered him doing. So that really impressed me. And of course, he really cleaned up his decision making. His playmaking improved. I thought of always him as like a kind of a shot first kid with just speed, stayed to the outside a lot. But I noticed, and I had Brock Otten that does a great job with OHL prospects. He told me, he's like, man, you are crazy ranking Tomasino where you have him. I'm like, man, and this happens. Sometimes you could only watch 1 or 2 games, and if you watch 1 or 2 games and those 2 games where the kid played like, like it's going to impact the ranking. You're going to have to go back and say, well, let me re-engage and watch him later on. And luckily I did to watch him. So that's pretty much, I would say Heinola for his dynamism, and Tomasino for just becoming a more well-rounded, dangerous player.
So the Ducks sit there in the 9th pick in the first round of the draft this year, and you've got Philip Broberg, which is kind of funny because the Ducks are all about those Swedish defensemen, and it almost seems like he would be the perfect fit coming to Anaheim with that defense kind of thinning out with prospects. What makes you like him so much that you would put him in the top 10?
Well, here's the thing. So my rankings, my rankings are based on NHL potential. My mock draft is a guess on how the draft is going to go. So I'm pretty low on Broberg compared to other people. I think I did a podcast earlier today, and the consensus rankings of about 15 different sources have Broberg around like the 14 to 15 range. I got him in the low 20s.
So I got that mixed up with your mock draft. That's my bad.
Yeah, no, that's fine. It's fine. It happens all the time. It's not a big deal. But I could understand why NHL teams would be infatuated with him, because you have a big puck-moving defenseman who hits, and he could skate, and he could score goals, right? My issue with him is more in the playmaking, decision-making, hockey IQ type of scenario. But, if you ask, I guess, coaches and GMs, they want that instant breakout. They want a defenseman who's not scared to take a hit, to move the puck and get the puck to safety. So in that regard, I do consider him has an incredibly high ceiling. And listen, the truth is this, that everybody's draft board looks different. The rankings are different from the media types. The rankings are different from the scouting types, and the rankings are different from with the GM and the scouting director type. So, like, it's basically a pitch meeting where teams have to pitch why they're going to take this kid where. And I foresee that when it comes to a guy like Broberg, when you hit the nail on the head, the Ducks have, they've traditionally drafted Swedish defensemen, but at the same time, the pool's getting a little thin. Remember, you can't look at the prospect pool as it is right now. You got to look at it like 3 and 4 years down the road. So if the Ducks keep skipping over defensemen in the draft, you got to factor in UFA age, or when RFA contracts are up, the salary cap. There's so many factors involved in making picks. Some teams will say, well, we don't care about that stuff. We just go best player available. And in that regard, I think that the Ducks would look at a player like Broberg. They have the history in Sweden. They've been mining Sweden for years. Really, in the Western Conference, I know that the league is getting smaller, but it seems like in the Western Conference, you got to be a big physical team. Look at the Blues. Look at the Jets, the Kings when they were at their peak, the Ducks, the Hawks. I mean, you need big physical players, and what better player to handle a blue line than a big physical guy that could skate on top of that? So as time moves on, though, I think deep down, though, that I don't think the Ducks are going to be necessarily locked in for a defenseman at 9. I think that if there's going to be a player, one of the NTDP types that slips out of that top 5, I think they're going to grab the forward there, even though they're pretty deep at forward in the farm system, but sometimes you can't think that way when you're picking that high.
It just rang with me right away when I saw your mock draft, because I went to Breakfast with Bob Murray with the season ticket holder event, and he mentioned wanting to get a European big defenseman who could eat minutes. And when I saw him, like, oh, that guy kind of fits the role for that, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
We've kind of glossed over these guys a bit. We've talked a lot about the NTDP and a couple of the European guys in the draft. And in passing, we've mentioned the 3 forwards from the WHL, and Dylan Cozens, Peyton Krebs, and Kirby Daka. I don't want to go into too much detail on them, but what do these guys bring to the table? I mean, they might be outside of that NTDP group, but it does represent a strong group from the WHL this year.
Yeah, absolutely. A rebound year for them after last year was one of the worst WHL forward crops, I think, in history. I mean, 3 players, 3 different skill sets, I guess. They're all Western Canadian kids, so you're going to get the physical aspect of their game. All three of them have it. I would say Krebs is more of a leader, a playmaker, a 200-foot type of player. He played on a very bad team this year, and he carried them, and he was able to put up a lot of points without the benefit of like a real dominant, power play quarterback or, goal scoring winger. I mean, he did a lot of it on his own, kills penalties. And he was probably Canada's best center at the under 18 Worlds. Cozens is more like a Brendan Shanahan type, even though he's a center. He's fast. He's aggressive. He can hit. He could punish. He's got a great shot, great attitude, well-spoken. I have a feeling that out of all the interviews that they conducted, I think Cozens probably blew him away the most, or one of them at least. just because the way he carries himself on the ice, very competitive. And plus you're looking at a guy that has that versatility. He could play center, he could play wing. He could be a net front presence. He could be that sniper from the slot. He could also be a two-way type, a leader, take big face-offs, what have you. And then Doc is like a Joe Thornton type, big body, very, very tenacious, aggressive, not as fast. Obviously, speed is a little skating style is a bit, I guess, not clunky, but he's got a very wide, gangly stride. He's a little bit of a hunched skater. But a sublime playmaker. I would say his playmaking and his vision close to Jack Hughes. He's that good in terms of finding the open man, log big minutes, could run the power play, very good penalty killer and a threat to score while shorthanded. So you look at those three similar players because they're all Western Canadian kids and they're basically all three of them are centers. But they offer, I guess, the different things in different areas. So the thing about this, a lot of people are higher on them than the NTDP kids, and it's only one game, but you had Canada's best against America's best in the at the what's it called, the World Championships, and Team USA embarrassed Canada. It wasn't even close. So to me, that was, I mean, it's one game, and listen,
sure.
USA always beats Canada in those events because Canada sends their best to the Holinka, where Team USA sends their B team. But this particular Canadian group was, I would say, it was like an A- team because they had everybody that they wanted except for Bowen Byram and except for Doc, who was hurt. But when you go head to head, Boldy, Zegras, Turcotte versus Doc, Krebs, and Cousins, I got to side with the Americans on that one. So. It all depends, but what I always tell people every year, the picks 1 through 10 don't always end up being 1 through 10 in terms of NHL careers. You're going to have kids that have picked, so who's to say that Kirby Doc let's say goes 11 and he turns out to have a better career than, let's say, Jack Hughes or Kappo Kakko. So you never know. But I think it is good for the WHL to have those kids, and all three are basically they have franchise cornerstone potential. They could be a number one center in the NHL. I mean, it's that simple.
So looking back at the Ducks here for a minute, we've talked a lot about the top 10, and but looking at it towards the end of the first round, they got the 29th pick, and in the second they got the 39th. If we're, as us Ducks fans, who should we be looking to for those two slots for the Ducks to be picking out from?
Well, it depends. My rankings tend to be a little bit different than a lot of, I guess, the consensus rankings, because I try to really spend as much time watching the European leagues as often as I watch the CHL and the NTDP and the USHL. So, let's say, okay, so Bob Murray says he wants a big defenseman that could skate. Well, if he doesn't get Broberg, then he's going to have a kid like Moritz Seider, maybe that might fall that low if people pass on him. Maybe a guy like Bjornfot, who has been, I think, better than Broberg, and I'm going to rank him ahead of Broberg. Not as big, and maybe not straight line speed is as great, but a much higher hockey sense and IQ. There's a Czech winger out there that I really like, and he seems like a Ducks type of a prospect because he's a winger he's a smart kid. Very could play physical. He's got a great shot, and sometimes the Ducks, they get these players that a natural position is the wing, but they play like centers. And his name's Michael Tepley. He plays for Liberec in the Czech league, and he split the season between the adult league and the junior league. But he also played at the U18 level, a lot of tournaments, and he's a kid. I mean, a lot of people are pretty selling him short. I love this kid's poise. Very few teenage kids could control the puck at the blue line and not give it away or be put a big target on their back as an opportunity for the other team to steal the puck and go the other way in a break. But this kid handles pressure better than any forward I've ever seen, really, outside of maybe one or two in this draft class. So he's one of the guys. But then listen, you got the big kid like Ryder Donovan, who's a Kevin Hayes type of a player. Robert Mastro-Simone is a goal-scoring winger who was the leading scorer in the USHL playoffs this year before he got hurt. And then you got the guys that are going to fall. Ryan Suzuki. Okay, a lot of people have him middle of the first round. But what if he falls? He carried a pretty thin Barry team this year. They had a whole bunch of trades and a fire sale, and he carried him, and he was great. I would say he's even faster and got a better shot than his brother Nick. So, it's a good draft to have multiple first-round picks, put it that way. I think you're going to get first-round quality late into the first round, late into the second round, but they're going to be kids in that, even at 29, they're going to be kids that are going to be maybe in that 12 to 20 tier. And we've seen teams in the past, when they want to trade up to get into that area, they'll trade a second-round pick to move up 3 or 4 spots. So, I don't think the Ducks necessarily need to do that. But then again, I don't know what their draft board looks like. So if, let's say, they love Arthur Kaliev and he's available, let's say 25, and the Ducks got to have Arthur Kaliev, then, you might want to trade an extra pick to grab him. So,
well, it's like you were saying, right? If they swing big and get a forward in their 9th pick, they can go get that defenseman maybe in the later rounds, right? Later first round, early second round.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I don't think this draft isn't as deep as last year with defensemen, but there's a lot of good ones. Mostly Europeans, though. So that's a good thing. Number one, the Ducks have no problem drafting European players. The other thing that's interesting, though, is there's a lot of good Russian defensemen, and I wonder if the Ducks they really don't draft Russians, do they? And
no.
I wonder how that impacts their strategy, because I think there's a lot of good kids coming out of the Russian leagues this year, but then again, you got the Russian factor. So I like, listen, like I said, you got 2 first-round picks. You don't necessarily have to swing for the fences with 9, but you could really take a gamble on a kid at 29 and it turn out to be a really good player. So,
well, overall for the draft, for the 2019 draft, who would you say is the most underrated prospect? I know that's kind of a tough one to grab, but if you had to pick, who would your guy be for being underrated?
Well, I mean, underrated in terms of like not getting enough recognition.
Yeah, maybe someone who's not hitting that. Yeah, who's not hitting the media.
Bjorn Fott has to be one of them. I mean, this kid was the captain of the Swedish under 18 team. They won gold at the World 18s. He plays for a club team in Sweden called Djurgårdens, and that team has 4 defensemen out of 6. 4 defensemen that played for the Swedish national team. So, and he's the best out of all of them. So when there's not a whole lot of puck to go around. There's not enough puck to go around. I like the fact that he's with that dominant presence. He's a guy that I think should be talked about being a possible top 15 pick. I know a lot of us have been cautious with him, but he's one guy. Another guy I like a lot too is Masha Simone. Like I mentioned him earlier. Like, this kid is an elite goal scorer. He just plays in the USHL. But he's headed to BU, which is an elite program. They churn out a lot of quality NHL talent. He's a kid. I don't really see that much of a difference between what he does and what Kaliev does, except Kaliev plays in an easier league. Masha Simone, he's a kid that you could have him go to college for a couple years and marinate, but his shot, his ability to score at even strength, his compete level, incredibly high, way higher than Kaliev's, that's for sure. So those are just 2 guys. If I go through my list, John Beecher is a menacing power center. You want to talk about a throwback that the old school scouts would love. He's a great checker, but he's got blinding speed and he's got a hard shot. So you got a 2-way center that knows how to score goals.
Like the old school power forward type.
But he's a center, and he's a good center. He could check, he could win faceoffs, he could kill penalties. So almost like a David Backes type. And we all know Backes in his prime was impossible to. Yeah. There's another kid I like a lot from Finland, Patrick Puistola. He played half the season against adult competition in Finland, was their top-line player at a lot of international events. I don't think he's going to be a second-round pick. I had him ranked in the second round, and I still do, but he's a kid that I could see slipping into the first round, having a pretty good NHL career. I mean, great hands, great playmaker, could score too, crafty with the puck, could make inside moves, doesn't really fret if he has a double team in front of him. So I'll throw one more in there. Albin Greva. Albin Greva is I don't want to call him a lunch pail type, but he is just a dirty player. And not dirty like he's dirty like illegal dirty. He's like dirty like his uniform is always dirty. If it could be dirty, it would be dirty. Like if he played baseball, he'd be the guy that by the second inning has a completely filthy uniform. He scored a huge goal against Canada to eliminate them at the under 18s. But this kid he's like a pest. He's annoying. He's physical. He's fast. He's got great hands. And I can see teams really liking that in him. He has like that North American grit to him. But even when you look at it, like he's always like unshaven and sweaty. He's a real throwback. I can just picture him like the kind of guy that would like go to the bench and like light up a Winston and drink a beer, like like Keith Hernandez with the Mets back in the day. So, but yeah, there's a lot of good players that you start to really attach yourselves to a lot of these kids as the season progresses, and of course it impacts your rankings. If it's your rankings, they're your favorites, so you put them where you want them to go. And but those kids I just mentioned, I wouldn't be surprised if like those are the kids that I'm mad that I can't get them into the first round. I mean, that's how good of a draft it is.
Well, I gotta end off with the same question I asked you last year. Last year I asked you how good is Jack Hughes. This year I gotta ask you how good is Alexis Lafreniere, because he's slated to go number 1 in 2020, and he might get some competition from Quentin Byfield and others, but he really seems like at this point a consensus number 1 for next year.
Yeah, smartest. He is the smartest center that I've seen play in a long time. I would say that Eichel and McDavid, in terms of hockey sense, and able to just always make the right play, and to like Jack Hughes he does have a high hockey sense, but he forces a lot of plays. He does a lot of, and that you fix that with time. But Lafreniere is he's just a clean elite player. Like he just does almost like a consistent mistake-free game. He's tough to knock off the puck. Obviously, he's got the size, he's got the balance. He's a very good skater, but I'm having a tough time finding a comparable to him, because he's just such he's like a hodgepodge of so many elite players that I've seen in the past. So to me, he's without a doubt the consensus number 1. We all know that things happen. Byfield, when I watch him, I do see him force things. I don't see a ridiculously high hockey IQ like I see in Lafreniere. So for me, it's pretty straightforward. I know a lot of people like Holtz and Raymond, the two Swedish, the what do they call them? The crazy twins or whatever they call them. But the two goal scoring wingers from Finland, they're pretty impressive as well. But to me, it's the Lafreniere draft, no doubt.
Well, hey, Steve, thanks so much for coming on the show, man. If they haven't learned something listening to you the past 2 seasons coming on, they weren't paying attention, because you just got an insane amount of knowledge. You guys can find him at the Draft Analyst on Twitter. And do you got anything coming up? I know you have your draft report releasing here soon. Do you want to plug that real quick?
Yeah, it'll be. I'll tweet out the link. It'll be posted on my blog. It'll be released on Monday, June the 10th. It's called the 2019 Draft Analyst Draft Report. 250 scouting reports, detailed scouting reports. Not like this guy skates, this guy shoots. I try to really break it down and let people know what roles they had on their teams, how they were deployed, how strengths, weaknesses, what have you. So also I'll do a team by team preview, which is a lot of fun to do. Rankings, there'll be a 2-round mock draft in there. So it's only $5 too. It'll be a PDF download. You click on a link, it goes to PayPal. You pay your $5, you get yourself a 150-page draft guide. Right now, I've got about 60,000 words of scouting reports.
Holy crap, man.
Completed. So with still a couple more to do. So and then just follow me on Twitter at the Draft Analyst. Go to the Draft blog. The Draft thing is, unfortunately, with all the work I do with the draft guide, it takes my time away from posting stuff on the blog, which was really my true love and joy to do. But the draft guide, to me, it's like a one-stop shop. You get that draft guide, you're probably set for the next 2 drafts, because a lot of these kids won't get drafted, but they'll eventually get signed or redrafted or something like that, and you'll have a scouting report handy when they get picked up. So yeah.
No, hey, everyone, go check it out. Go find him at the Draft Analyst on Twitter. Pick up his draft report. It's a steal at $5. Steve, thank you so much for the time. I know it's late for you, but we always appreciate you coming on the show. Have a good night, man.
Yeah, you too, guys. Thanks. Take care.
Take care.